really good at literature, I would know that. I might want to be an English major. There's a type of education that I think we better. If he's good at mathematics, I might want to be an engineer. I'll steer him in that direction. I don't want my public school directing him and tracking him that way. But not everybody thinks like we do. Okay? And that's why we have this great thing and this great democracy. We get together and come up with some ideas and we share them. And that mama that I was telling you about in Indiana didn't like what was happening. Talked to the principal, brought in, talked to the textbook lady, and she could. And then she started peeling back, and the school started peeling back, and they found out it didn't just affect public school; it affected the private schools because of the curriculum books, because of all the textbooks. And so they got together. And there was this guy who was the Secretary of Education. He was a supporter of Republican. The Bill and Melinda Gates, they helped him raise money, all these other people. And there was a Democrat. Democrat said, I don't know about this Common Core. Some of my teachers union people, they're telling me they're not going to get to teach what they want. Democrat was against it. Democrat beat the incumbent Republican. The incumbent Republican had 5 times as much money. That set off a shockwave. Governor Mitch Daniels. Who's the governor? Mitch Daniels. Mitch Daniels. Oh, so I'm going off my notes. Mitch Daniels, he recognized the importance of it. The ban on Common Core had failed the prior year. They're the first state now that passed legislation to get them out of it. And it was because of the Democrat that got elected that understood. This is nonpartisan here. This is absolutely nonpartisan. It needs to be nonpartisan. It's just hard getting a hold of some of those Democrats. Remember, being liberal means never having to say you're sorry. But I think some of the liberals that we have here, if we explain to them, you're losing control of your schools too. You're going to have things imposed on you that you don't like. How would you like a Republican having all the data, 400 different data points on all your people that we can manipulate? You probably don't want that either. So there's some common ground that can be found on this, I'm telling you. There's 2 tracks. I'll probably take up way too much time. I'll give you an overview of it. There's some bills you can throw in and jump up and down and say, look at me, look at all the work I'm doing. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in actually passing something. I want it passed. I want Common Core gone. Yeah. I want education choice in our state. That's right. We've greatly expanded. Every time we've pushed, we've had some success. Not success that I wanted, but some success. We got more charter schools in the state than we've ever had. We got public school options now that were impossible only a decade ago, only because we've been pushing and cracking that nut. And then the first school choice program, it didn't happen through standalone legislation. It happened as a budget proviso. And there's a difference. Standalone legislation, that's statutory language. That's in the law books. That's something that becomes law and it stays law until it's amended or changed. It's a permanent law fix. That's what you ultimately want to go with everything. But then there's the budget. The budget is a 1-year bill. 1 year, we pass the state budget and we spend $22 billion in our state. About $7 billion state monies, the rest of it's federal and other funds. That's what we do in Columbia. That consumes most of our time working on the budget. The budget has a 1-year life. The budget gives authority for the taxing of the money. It gives authority for the spending of the money. And it's being spent in many different ways. We debate about how we're going to spend it, and you can put caveats over how the money will be spent. And those are individual things called provisos. A 1-year direction specifically to a certain group of money. And so the monies this year on a budget proviso was my school choice bill. I was able to figure out a way of making it germane for 1 year. It has to be germane. You can't just do anything. It has to relate to the spending of raising of money. And so I inserted a budget proviso, made the argument, and I lost it. And I went to my friend Kevin Bryant. I said, Kevin, take out this one provision and put it up again, and let's see what will happen because the vote was close. And he did. And we survived that. So now we have the first school choice program where monies can be used at a private institution. If you have a handicapped child, you can get up to a $10,000 scholarship. That's a lot of money. I bet they spend a lot more than that in your traditional public school. And so if you get a better shake somewhere else, the resources are there. Hopefully we'll expand and make it permanent law. But Common Core can be the same way. we can direct that not one penny of the money is going to the Department of Education can be used for the implementation of Common Core. That's a budget proviso. And here's the difference in getting them passed. On standalone legislation, statutory language, you introduce a bill that goes to the Education Committee. The chairman looks at the bill. Common Core, get rid of. Grooms is sponsoring it. I'm going to put it in this desk drawer. It stays there. The chairman never has to have a hearing. Never has to do anything with it. All right. And suppose it did happen and it passed the Senate. It goes to the House. The House chairman gets it. I'm just going to put it in the drawer. That'll be the end of it. The fair tax. I'll support the fair tax. It took me a while, but we all came. John Stein worked on that thing for a while. We got a South Carolina fair tax bill. It's now about 4 years old. We had some problems with folks in Texas when we first wrote it. Had to get their approval, worked all that out, and we introduced it. I had 23 co-sponsors, I think. Chairman of the Finance Committee got that bill, looked at it. Yeah. Never had a committee hearing on it, 4 years. Committee chairman gets to decide if the bill has any progress whatsoever. He did promise me that he could give me a subcommittee hearing next year. He said, but don't worry, it's going to be stacked against him. But I know it'll be stacked against him. But that's the committee chairman. Now there's the budget provisos. A budget proviso, the budget's on the floor. It's on the floor of the Senate, we're debating the budget, and any member can introduce a proviso. And it has to be voted on by the entire body.
Yes.
It doesn't have to go through the committee process. Any budget proviso needs 50% to pass. It needs 50% in the other body. So we need half the Senate and half the House to say this is a good idea to unfund Common Core in South Carolina until we can pass the statutory language. The chairman of the Senate Education Committee promised me last year he would give us another subcommittee hearing on Common Core. He will keep his word. He will give me that subcommittee sometime next year. I do not know when. He's also promised hearings on school choice, and we're having some hearings across the state right now. That's another uphill battle, but they're worth fighting. It's all worth fighting for. That's why y'all are here tonight. It's worth fighting for. And so there's two ways we can go. And in order to get a bill to move, Sean Bennett's a great guy, right here in Dorchester. Sean Bennett. You can write Sean Bennett all day long. Move the Common Core bill. He can't do it. He can't move it. The only person that can move it would be the committee chairman. So the first pressure point on any bill has to always be the committee chairman. You can write the members and talk to them and say, I want you to push this bill. I got no. Once I gave the fair tax bill over to the chairman of the Finance Committee, he has possession of the bill. He decides the agenda. So the first point of pressure has to be on the committee chairman.
Who is it?
A little bit of lesson on lobbying, and that is John Corson, Senator John Corson from Richland County. He has to be asked nicely by everybody across the state. Please give. How's your eyes? Somewhere in there is the bill number. It's either 30 or 60. I didn't need these 3 years ago. Senate Bill 300. 300. Senate Bill 300. I'm not sure of the House bill. Senate Bill 300. Contact Senator John Corson. Have anybody you know across the state contact Senator John Corson and request that Senate Bill 300 be given a subcommittee. Courson. He's also the president pro tem of the Senate. Okay? And then what John Corson will do, once he decides that he's going to give it a subcommittee, he'll name a subcommittee chairman. That's the second point that everybody needs to send a letter to. Schedule because committee chairman hands it off to the subcommittee chairman. Subcommittee chairman can still put it in his drawer. Probably won't. Subcommittee chairman will work with the chairman and report back what he's doing. But subcommittee chairman has to answer to his constituents back on too. Subcommittee chairman needs to have a hearing. And the subcommittee chairman needs to have a hearing where people can come in and have the opportunity to talk about the bill instead of 6:30 on a Thursday afternoon when nobody knows what's happening. That's to say, you could write me all day long, I can't affect what the subcommittee chairman's gonna do. First, chairman has to decide to move the bill. Subcommittee chairman has to hold a hearing, and the hearing has to be accessible to the public. And then, on the internet, you can see all this, the subcommittee members, you'll see who they are. Generally 3 or 5, sometimes 7. The chairman and the subcommittee chairman decide how many's gonna be on it. It's subjective, it can change, depending on the bill and who wants on it. That's the first people who are gonna vote on the bill. Now we need 3 people, we need 2. 7, we got to find 4. We got to target a majority that's on that committee and present them with good information. If it's a Democrat, you need to hit them on what would be interesting to a Democrat. If it's a Republican, hit them on what's interesting to. You got to understand who you're talking to, what information that they'll respond to most, and have the folks from, particularly back at their district, hit them with it. Did you know this? You got to have a majority, and that's what moves a bill out of a committee. And then you go to half the committee, then it goes to the floor. Once it hits the floor, every member gets an opportunity on it. But as a budget proviso, it's the entire budget at one time. So this year, 2 things are going to happen. We need to push the bill in statutory language, make sure it happens, and we're going to defund it in the budget. That's our 2 tracks. To defund it in the budget, the House starts their budget hearings in January. They kick out a budget sometime around mid-March. The Senate starts theirs around mid-March. And then the whole budgeting process takes about 6-8 months. Then we have a state budget. So there'll be a vote of the entire House and a vote in the entire Senate on defunding Common Core. Okay, that's a sloppy way of doing it, but it works. But we want the statutory standalone language like they passed, and in the end, that's what we want. That's what we really want with this. We also want school choice. I think the 2 go hand in hand. Because it doesn't matter. It does matter, but if the only available textbooks from now on are to be Common Core compliant, you've got to work really hard to go around and then add things to it, even at a private school. And with that, I'll try to answer some questions.
You said months. Did you mean months or weeks?
On what?
On debating the budget in the Senate.
The budgeting process takes months. It takes months. It starts with that. The House will actually have budget committee hearings before we go back in January. And the Common Core proviso will be before, the subcommittee process works also. The budget, when it comes on the floor, will have things in it already. If it's not already in it, I will put up an amendment on the floor and we'll all vote on it. But it's a lot better if it's in there. Then the other side has to knock it out.
Okay.
So we'll try to put it in. And the budget debate, I've been on the Senate floor where when the budget was on the floor, where we came in the morning and we left at night and we did nothing but the budget. It has been as long as 8 weeks, and it's been as short as 3 days. It depends on how much work the subcommittee, the finance committee has done, and what the preparation and what the issues are within the budget. But you don't know how long that'll last once it starts. But you put your provisos up, and then there could be stalling, and then someone can write 200 provisos and want to argue. All of a sudden, you start doing the math. 46 members, 200 provisos, each one taking an hour. You start doing the days and the weeks. It's built.
This is kind of a funny question. It would appear to me that if you prioritize efforts and focus, if everybody's teaching the same thing, school choice don't mean anything. You follow what I'm saying?
Mainly because of the textbooks.
Well, if everybody's doing Common Core, it doesn't make any difference where you go. Then it would appear to me that it behooves us to focus on Common Core, get rid of that, and then I'm 100% behind school choice.
Common Core is important to get rid of, because it also has the folks that do some of the folks that are involved with the College Board that do the SAT are also involved with Common Core standards.
Yeah, I know.
So, what do you think the SAT questions are going to relate to in a couple of years?
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. So we need to focus on Common. I'm suggesting we need to focus on Common Core and then focus on school choice. And I'm 100% behind, as a retired teacher, I'm behind school choice.
There's a number of things you hit when you can. I mean, you absolutely hit as hard as you can when you can. But those are 2. School choice, that's been my thing. That's something. There's other things I picked up on, but those 2 are important. And we've got, it happened in Indiana. It happened but it happened in Indiana when some Democrats started realizing, hey, it's also in our interest, it's in our collective state's interest to get out of this thing. There's bills, there's probably a half dozen bills or more. I'm sure we'll hear more at the Sheriff U conference. In the first speaker, she's got a video. Jane Robbins, watch it. She does a much better job explaining this than I did in the short time I've been here tonight. Yes, sir, Doc, come back.
How does Common Core affect homeschooling?
It would affect it with the curricula and textbooks that you want to teach your the homeschoolers.
Purchase the same textbook.
Well, you could purchase any textbook, but
But
give this thing a decade. All the textbooks a decade from now are going to be Common Core compliant. The marketplace works. There's enough homeschoolers, but you can have different curricula and different, but also the requirements to get into college. It's going to fundamentally alter education in this country. The SAT scores, they'll all be tailored into it. It's a gigantic race to the middle. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. Who was the chairman of the Senate Education Committee?
John Corson.
Oh, okay. And I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about the money that Clemson got for the bracelets for the students to wear.
Don't have a clue.
You don't know? Linda, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Clemson University got several $100,000 of money to test the bracelets that the students will wear that will indicate their,
Psychometric, biometric testing.
Yeah.
Biometric response.
I'll call my son to see if he's got one. I have no idea. First I heard of that. Yes, sir.
What's the domino effect? If you defund it, how does that affect the local school districts when they're funding, when they're line item study?
That's what I said, the budget and the budget won't only last a year. Statutory language, budget only lasts, you have to fight every year. Budget's a sloppy way of doing it, because the mandate will still be there from the State Board of Education, but the law will say you can't have any money to do it. So it'll put people at cross purposes here. So the mandate doesn't go away, just the funding of it does. So you can't spend any state dollars to implement Common Core. It's much better to have the statutory language, it's the policy of the state that we do not have Common Core. And then we'll go back to our state. We'll go back to the other assessments that we had before that, or the curricula that we're now replacing it with the phase-in. This is a phase-in year. This is a phase. The state is now in Common Core. Common Core curricula is being taught this year in South Carolina. Next year we'll be tested on it. This year we're not being tested on it. Yes, ma'am.
He's been raising his hand for a long time.
I have a couple questions actually. First one is, I heard you say something about SATs would actually be going to it. I thought that was kind of a college run type testing where.
The SATs are operated by what's called the College Board. It's a private group. Some of the people that run that run the College Board are also the ones are also part of those two private groups that will write and own the Common Core curriculum.
I would think that if they start referring to the Common Core, I would think that would actually start hurting the students getting into college, and all of a sudden now the colleges have to take 5 steps back to get the students caught where they need to be for the course or whatever.
There's a university in Texas, their report was that it takes us 2 grades back.
Okay. And then the other question I have is you were referring to that school choice bills. Now, I have a 3-year-old. I've got another year or 2 before I have to start putting him in kindergarten. I'm strongly considering private school. That being said, if the choices, if that choice bill goes through and he's not handicapped, but if it gets past the handicap portion and I have that option of getting funding to put my school in a private school, how would that mandate the private school on the principles that they want to teach? Like say if I send to a Christian school, all of a sudden, God's taken out of all
Yeah,
public
yeah,
schools.
it goes back to the example in Indiana where the person who got behind it and actually led the efforts was two, they were friends and their children were in a Catholic school. And it was because the mathematics, social studies, language arts, a lot of the subjects, what you would be taught in a public school and in the private school would necessarily be the same. Well, particularly in Indiana, where all the private schools that work off of any type of choice programs are mandated to take the same state assessment test. It would depend on whether the private school would accept any type of school choice money if it becomes available sometime in the future. It will at some point. I just don't know when. We're the last southern state to do this. Even Mississippi's realized it's in their best interest to move forward with something like this.
Does that mean God will be taken out of the Christian schools too?
No, we wouldn't. Well, I can't predict the future, but that's one of the biggest motivators I have for ensuring that there is Christian education available in South Carolina.
I would imagine a Christian school would have to teach evolution.
You would be private, you wouldn't have to teach anything. I mean, the private schools, there's something called a Blaine Amendment. They were passed all across our country. They said you can't use public monies for a Christian education, basically. There was this guy in Congress who was afraid that the Catholics were going to take over the world, so they had Blaine, and all the states passed it. It went to our Supreme Court, and our Supreme Court ruled that Blaine Amendment doesn't apply. So we've got court case and legal precedent where public monies can flow to private religious institutions, and it doesn't affect what they teach.
Yeah, but I think you got me backwards there. If they're teaching evolution for the Common Core test, then Christian schools would have to teach.
It would appear on summative assessments. And the way the school choice bill works right now, a private school that would accept the monies from the school choice program, they could either be judged by the state assessments or a nationally normed test. And there's plenty out there, like SAT, BSAP, or others. So there would still be some sort of test that students in a private school would have to take if tax credits were used to fund the tuition.
They still have to take the ACT or the SAT to be accepted at any college.
That's correct.
So you're back to
Which
square one.
those tests are being by admission of the CEO of the college board being brought in line with Common Core as we speak, or it's already done.
Common Core will start driving everything.
Yep.
So you're saying the testing is all changing everywhere, so whatever you teach is not gonna match up with the testing unless they take Common Core.
For the Common Core assessments, yes. If our state got out of it, Texas never went in, Texas still has their assessment test, whatever they'll be. And that's gonna cost, and they got their state universities and so forth, and we have ours. And we accept students from other states that have learned different stuff also. But you don't want education nationalized. I think it was, I read somewhere, the quote was, education without representation. That's what the Common Core is, education without. If you don't like what's happening, tough. You got these two private groups based in Washington that decide everything. And we don't want that here. It's not good for South Carolina, it's not good for public education, it's not good for anybody in the nation. So, yeah, yes.
Is there a website that you could go to find out for South Carolina who's on what committee and who the chairman is and all?
scstatehouse.org. And that website's got just about everything you want to know about state government. You can click on House, Senate, committees, who's on the committees and so forth. And Jeff, you get Jeff.
Hi. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, because I know there's some people in here that may not know the data collection you were talking about. That doesn't stop when they leave high school. That goes through age 20. And the other point on that, the Federal Secretary of Education, R.A. Duncan, made a change to the FERPA law. It's the Federal Education Rights and Protection Act, whatever. Now that information can be released to certain private parties without the knowledge or consent of the parents or students.
That's right. As long as it's done as.
I think that's
You
important.
could come up with an excuse and get it, yes. They'll say that they can't, but then you read the regulations that they promulgated, and yes, you can.
Basically, it's gonna follow people the rest of their lives,
Right.
not just their school.
That's right.
I mean, when you go to the Department of Labor, someplace down the road, and when you're applying for a job when you're 55, this is gonna be available.
I think what Microsoft and Google can do with information like that, kind of what they market and who and what they're taking. I mean, and you wonder why they're so generous with their money.
Hey, Cheryl has a question.
This is just kind of a logistical question about the proviso thing.
Yes.
And it has several parts. First, because I forget from when I was there, but the House takes up its budget early. First thing, are the provisos taken up in the order in which they were added to the budget? Is it, or the provisos can be just taken at random? Okay. But would the acceptance of a proviso by the House, if the House approved the proviso, would that maybe push the Senate subcommittee?
If the House
Would
were-
it buy us some time?
The budget begins in the House. If the House were to adopt the proviso
Uh-huh.
to defund it, it comes to the Senate.
Right.
The Senate would then have to affirmatively vote to remove it.
Okay.
We'd have to vote to take it out. It's easier, it's easier when the proviso comes over in the House than it would be for us to try to insert it.
Right. So if the proviso was adopted in the House and it came over to the Senate, I guess what I'm saying is, if the Senate adopted it too, and you did defund it, could that buy you some time and also some influence on the subcommittee
Yes,
to get it taken?
yes, yes, yes. Because then it's a messy way of doing things, but the General Assembly would now have spoken, and a majority of the people's representatives have said, we're not funding this, which puts added pressure on the committees in the House and the Senate to pass the statutory language to codify it. Okay, we're just gonna codify it, because it makes no sense to have a mandate to do something, and on the other hand, saying it's illegal to use any dollars to fund it. So yes, that would give pressure on the committees to go ahead and move forward with it. And that normally happens. I get criticized sometimes for putting things in the budget, but if that's your only option, that's your only option, and I've done that on many occasions.
Thank you.
I don't wanna keep, I'll
No, go ahead. No, you-
after the meeting,
Let me,
I'll stay here for a long time and answer anybody's questions. I don't want to take you out anymore.
let me just tell you something. This group watched the Jane Robbins DVD back in May.
Okay.
And at the end of that, they said that this was something that they really, as a group, wanted to go after. And so they have been sending postcards to the state school board and the Education Oversight Committee. We got Dorchester too to have a workshop on Common Core. It was totally rigged in favor of Common Core. But we brought in somebody against it, they made a very good point. So they are really interested in actively working on
And
it.
I'm gonna tell you, elections matter. They
Yeah.
absolutely matter. Every vote matters. Every person that you put on your delegation matters. We had, that came down to one vote over who was gonna represent let's see, we're in the first judicial circuit. Yes, the first judicial circuit. It was